Hello viewers and welcome to another chapter of reading. Before I begin, I would like to address that it is my cousin Kai Kai's 7th birthday. He's not physically able to make an appearance cameo, so you will have to make do with this lovely picture I have of both of us on August 9th. Happy birthday, Kai! We love you. Now that that's over with, let's see what we got in my advent calendar today. Let's see. We are opening this one right here. So let's find out what's inside, shall we? Just carefully opening it. Don't want to tear anything. Oh, neat. It's like a little notepad. See? It's like a little notepad. And it has the Hogwarts crest on it. I don't know if you can see it well in this lighting. But, we'll fix that up for you. Can you see the Hogwarts crest now? So, that's what I got today in the advent calendar. A little notepad. I can always use lots of notepads. And journals. I am an author in the making, okay? So, oh yeah, my pen name / pseudonym, this is the proper term by the way, will be Amy Reina. AMY space REINA. As I become an author, you better remember that. Okay, back to reading. Yeah. Now, on to reading, shall we? Chapter 12. The Triwizard Tournament. Through the gates flanked with statues of winged boars and up the sweeping drive the carriages trundled, swaying dangerously in what was fast becoming a gale. Leaning against the window, Harry could see Hogwarts becoming nearer, with its many lighted windows blurred and shimmering behind the thick curtain of rain. At least it's not made of iron. History reference. Lightning flashed across the sky as their carriage came to a halt before the great oak front doors, which stood at the top of a flight of stone steps. People who had occupied the carriages in front were already hurrying up the stone steps into the castle. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville jumped down from their carriage and dashed up the steps too, looking up only when they were safely inside the cavernous torchlit entrance hall with its magnificent marble staircase. "Blimey," said Ron, shaking his head and thundering water everywhere. "That keeps up the lake's going to overflow. I'm so... Ah!" A large red water-filled balloon had dropped from out of the ceiling onto Ron's head and exploded. Oh, how I wish I had visuals for you. But, I'd rather not get wet when I'm holding a book, so just imagine. Drenched and sputtering, Ron staggered sideways into Harry just as the second water bomb dropped, narrowly missing Hermione. It burst at Harry's feet, sending a wave of cold water over his sneakers into his socks. People all around them shrieked and started pushing one another in their efforts to get out of the line of fire. Harry looked up and saw floating 20 feet above them, Heaves the poltergeist, a little man in a bell-covered hat and orange bow tie. His wide, malicious face contorted with concentration as he took aim again. "Peeves!" yelled an angry voice. "Peeves, come down here at once!" Professor McGonagall, deputy headmistress and head of Gryffindor House, had come dashing out of the Great Hall. She skidded on the web floor and grabbed Hermione around the neck to stop herself from falling. "Ouch! Sorry, Miss Granger." "It's all right, Professor," Hermione gasped, massaging her throat. "Peeves, get down here now!" barked Professor McGonagall, straightening her pointed hat and glaring upward through her square-rimmed spectacles. "No, doing nothing!" cackled Peeves, lobbing a water bomb at several fifth-year girls, who screamed and dived into the Great Hall. "Already up, lit on they? Needle squad, whee!" And he aimed another bomb at a group of second-years who had just arrived. "I shall call the headmaster!" shouted Professor McGonagall. "I'm warning you, Peeves!" Peeves stuck out his tongue, threw the last of the water bombs into the air, and zoomed off up the marble staircase, cackling insanely. "Well, move along then," said Professor McGonagall sharply to the bedraggled crowd. "Into the Great Hall. Come on." Harry, Ron, and Hermione slipped and slid across the entrance hall and through the double doors on the right, Ron muttering furiously under his breath as he pushed his sopping hair off his face. The Great Hall looked its usual splendid self, decorated for the start of term feast. Golden plates and goblets gleamed by the light of hundreds and hundreds of candles, floating over the tables in midair. The four-wall and house tables were packed with chattering students. At the top of the hall, the staff sat on one side of a fifth table, facing their pupils. It was much warmer in here. Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked past the Slytherins, Ravenclaws, and Hufflepuffs, choosing to sit down with the rest of the Gryffindors at the far side of the hall, next to nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost. Pearly white and semi-transparent, Nick was dressed tonight in his usual doublet, but with a particular large ruff which served the dual purpose of looking extra festive and ensuring that his head didn't wobble too much on his partially severed neck. "Good evening," he said, beaming at them. "Says who?" said Harry, taking off his sneakers and emptying them of water. "Oh, Nick. They weren't really polite to you, were they?" "No, don't worry. I would be polite to you regardless." "Hope they hurry up with the sorting. I'm starving." "Oh, Harry." The sorting of the new students into houses took place at the start of every school year, but by an unlucky combination of circumstances, Harry hadn't been present at one since his own. He was quite looking forward to it. Then a highly excited, breathless voice called down the table, "Hiya, Harry!" It was Colin Creevey, a third year to whom Harry was something of a hero. "Hi, Colin," said Harry wearily. "Harry, guess what? Guess what, Harry?" That's pretty much the same thing. "My brother's starting! My brother Dennis!" "Good," said Harry. "He's really excited," said Colin, practically bouncing up and down in his seat. "I just hope he's in Gryffindor. Keep your fingers crossed, eh, Harry?" Yeah, all right," said Harry. He turned back to Hermione, Ron, and nearly headless Nick. "Brothers and sisters usually go in the same houses, don't they?" he said. He was judging by the Weasleys, all 7 of whom who had been put in Gryffindor. Oh no, not necessarily, said Hermione. Barbossi's Patill's twins and Ravenclaw, and they're identical. You'd think they'd be together, wouldn't you? This brings up a wonderful tidbit of my life. I would like to think that my beloved Grace and Kaylee are in Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, respectively. It's not official, but Grace does seem to have the Gryffindor attitude. Whereas, Kaylee's a little more laid back. So yeah, I would think those 2 houses fit them. And honestly, being in different houses would actually be good for them. It's the same as if you were in an actual school and you were having different teachers for the school year. Each person is different, and each person learns at their own pace. So by having the separation of the 2, you actually help foster their own pace. And I find that to be a wonderful thing. Of course, certain parents may disagree, but ultimately, it really should be implemented into them that individuality is important. And I confess I am a huge advocate for individuality. I've been through a huge part of my life not being who I am, and it made me feel alone. I don't want anyone to undergo that same or similar treatment. It's just not fun. But anyway, moving on. Harry looked up at the staff table. There seemed to be rather more empty seats than usual. Hagrid, of course, was still fighting his way across the lake with the first years. Professor McGonagall was presumably supervising the drying of the entrance hall floor, but there was another empty chair too, and Harry couldn't think who else was missing. "Where's the defense against the Lord Arts teacher?" said Hermione, who was also looking up at the teachers. They never had a defense against the dark arts teacher who had lasted more than 3 terms yet. Harry's favorite by far had been Professor Lupin, who had resigned last year. I mean, he's in good company. Lupin's my favorite DA teacher too. He looked up and down the staff table. There was definitely no new face there. "Maybe they couldn't get anyone," said Hermione, looking anxious. Harry scanned the table more carefully. Tiny little Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, was sitting on a large pile of cushions beside Professor Sprout, the herbology teacher, whose hat was askew over her flyaway gray hair. I prefer the term silver more, honestly. It's more dignified, if you will. She was talking to Professor Cintra of the astronomy department. On Professor Cintra's other side was the sallow-faced, hook-nosed, greasy-haired potions master, Snape, Harry's least favorite person at Hogwarts. Harry's loathing of Snape was matched only by Snape's hatred of him, a hatred which had, if possible, intensified last year when Harry had helped Sirius escape right under Snape's overlarge nose. Snape and Sirius had been enemies since their own school days. On Snape's other side was an empty seat, which Harry guessed was Professor McGonagall's. Next to it, and in the very center of the table, sat Professor Dumbledore, the headmaster, his sweeping silver hair and beard shining in the candlelight, his magnificent deep green robes embroidered with many stars and moons. The tips of Dumbledore's wampum fingers were together, and he was resting his chin upon them, staring up at the ceiling through his half-moon spectacles as though lost in thought. Harry glanced up at the ceiling too. It was enchanted to look like the sky outside, and he had never seen it look this stormy. Black and purple clouds were swirling across it, and as another thunderclap sounded outside, a fork of lightning flashed across it.
Cool. Like, can you just imagine that from the if that were in the films? Oh, that would be beautiful.
Oh, hurry up! Ron moaned beside her. I could eat a hippogriff.
I would hope not.
Hippogriffs are wonderful creatures, so why would you eat one? I get it's the same, but I mean on a literal side, which I'm known for. You gotta have to consider that, you know? Anyhow. The words were no sooner out of his mouth than the doors of the great hall opened and silence fell. Professor McGonagall was leading a long line of first years up to the top of the hall. If Harry, Ron, and Hermione were wet, it was nothing to how these first years looked. They appeared to have swum across the lake rather than sailed. All of them were shivering with a combination of cold and nerves as they filed on the stacked table and came to a halt in a line facing the rest of the school. All of them except the smallest of the lot, the boy with mousy hair who was wrapped in what Harry recognized as Hagrid's moleskin overcoat. The coat was so big for him that it looked as though he were draped in a furry black circus tent. His small face protruded from over the collar, looking almost painfully excited. When he had lined up with his terrified-looking peers, he caught calm Prevy's eyes, gave a double thumbs up, and mouthed, I fell in the lake. He looked positively delighted about it. Professor McGonagall now placed a four-legged stool on the ground before the first year, and on top of that, an extremely old, dirty-patched wizard's hat. The first year stared at it. So did everyone else. For a moment there was silence. Then a long tear near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat broke into song. Yes, you get to hear my wonderful singing voice again. You should feel privileged. Anyhow. 1,000 years or more ago, when I was nearly so, there lived 4 wizards of renown, whose names are still well known. Old Gryffindor from Wildmoor, Ravenclaw from Bran, sweet Hufflepuff from Valley Broad, true Slytherin from Penn. They shared a wish, a hope, a dream. They hatched a daring plan to educate young sorcerers. Thus Hogwarts School began. Now each of these 4 founders formed their own house, for each did value different virtues in the ones they had to teach. By Gryffindor the bravest were prized far beyond the rest, for Gryffindor the cleverest would always be the best. For Hufflepuff hard workers were most worthy of admission, and power-hungry Slytherin loved those of great ambition. While still alive, they did divide the favorites from the throne, yet had to pick the worthy ones when they were dead and gone. 'Twas Gryffindor who found the way, he whipped me off his head. The founders put some brains in me, so I could choose instead. Now set me snug about your ears, I've never yet been wrong. I'll have a look inside your mind and tell where you belong. I hope you like it. The great hall rang with applause as the sorting had finished. I know it's not entirely accurate, but I'm trying to do it with applause while I'm holding the book for you guys. So let's start the sonnet saying, when it sorted us, said Harry, clapping along with everyone else. Sings a different one every year, said Ron. It's got to be a pretty warm night, hasn't it, being a hat? I suppose it spends all year making up the next one.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, in my experience. I mean, I dabble in a little bit of songwriting, so I kind of know. We're joined by my lovely Lily. Mwah. She's been a frequent visitor of certain chapters. I think her favorite chapter is the chapter she laid on the book in either Prisoner of Azkaban or Chamber of Secrets. One of those two. Okay, back to reading, yes? Professor McGonagall is now unrolling a large scroll of parchment. When I call out your name, you will be put on the hat and sit on the stool, she told the first years. When the hat knocks at your house, you will go and sit at the appropriate table. Ackerley Stewart. A boy walked forward, visibly trembling from head to foot, picked up the sorting hat, put it on, and sat down on the stool. I had to make new ones of these because I don't know what happened to my old ones that I used for Harry's sorting. I am so sorry. Ravenclaw! Shouted the hat. Stuart Ackerley took off the hat and hurried into his seat at the Ravenclaw table, where everyone was applauding him. Harry caught a glimpse of Toad, the Ravenclaw seeker, cheering Stuart Ackerley as he sat down. For a fleeting second, Harry had a strange desire to join the Ravenclaw table too. Baddock Malcolm! Wrong voice. Baddock Malcolm! Slytherin! The table on the other side of the hall erupted with cheers. Harry could see Malfoy clapping as Baddock joined the Slytherins. Harry wondered whether Baddock knew that Slytherin House had turned out more dark witches and wizards than any other. Fred and George hissed Malcolm Baddock as he sat down. Branstone Eleanor! Hufflepuff! Caldwell Owen! Hufflepuff! Creevy Dennis! Tiny Dennis Creevy staggered forward, tripping over Hagrid's moleskin, just as Hagrid himself slided into the hall through a door behind the teacher's table. About twice as tall as a normal man and at least 3 times as broad, Hagrid with his long, wild, tangled black hair and beard looked slightly alarming. A misleading impression, for Harry, Ron, and Hermione knew Hagrid to possess a very kind nature. He winked at them as he sat down at the end of the staff table and watched Dennis Creevy putting on the sorting hat. The rip at the brim opened wide. Gryffindor! The hat shouted. Hagrid clapped along with the Gryffindors as Dennis Creevy, beaming wildly, took off the hat, placed it back on the stool, and hurried over to join his brother. Colin, I fell in! He said shrilly, throwing himself into an empty seat. It was brilliant! And something in the water grabbed me and pushed me back into the boat. Cool! Said Colin just as excitedly. It was probably the giant squid, Dennis. Wow! Said Dennis, though nobody in their wildest dreams could hope for more than being thrown into a storm-tossed, fathoms-deep lake and pushed out of it again by a giant sea monster. Dennis, see that boy down there? The one with the black hat and glasses? See him? Know who he is, Dennis? Harry looked away, staring very hard at the sorting hat, now sorting Emma Dobbs. The sorting continued. I would like to know Emma's house. What about you guys? Boys and girls with varying degrees of fright on their faces moved moving one by one to the four wagons. The dwindling slowly as Professor McGonagall passed the elves. Oh, hurry up, Ron moaned, massaging himself. Now, Ron, this morning is much more important than food, said Nearly Headless Nick as Lori Mara. Madeline Laura became a Hufflepuff. Of course it is, if you're dead, snapped Ron. I do hope this year's batch of Gryffindors are up to scratch, said Nearly Headless Nick, applauding as McDonald and Natalie joined the Gryffindor table. We don't want to break our winning streak, do we? Gryffindor had won the Inter-House Championship for the last 3 years in a row. Richard Graham! Slytherin! Quirk Orla! Ravenclaw! And finally with Whitby Kevin, Hufflepuff! The sorting ended. Professor McGonagall picked up the hat and the stool and carried them away. About time, said Ron, seizing his knife and fork and looking expectantly at his golden plate. Professor Dumbledore had gotten to his feet. He was smiling around at the students, his arms open wide in welcome. I only have 2 words to say to you, he told them, his deep voice echoing around the hall. Tuck in. Hear, hear, said Ron loudly as the empty dishes filled magically before their eyes. Nearly Headless Nick watched mournfully as Harry, Ron, and Hermione loaded their own plates. Ah, that's better, said Ron with his mouth full of mashed potato. You're lucky there's a feast at all tonight, you know, said Nearly Headless Nick. There was trouble in the kitchens earlier. Why? What happened? Said Harry through a sizable chunk of steak. The steak and mashed potatoes back to back. Oh, how I want a medium rare filet mignon now. Peeves, of course, said Nearly Headless Nick, shaking his head which wobbled dangerously. He pulled his ruff a little higher up on his neck. The usual argument, you know. He wanted to attend the feast. Well, it's quite out of the question. You know what he's like, utterly uncivilized. Can't see a plate of food without throwing it. He held a ghost council. The Bat Friar was all for giving him the chance. How very Hufflepuff of you. How very Hufflepuff of you, Bat Friar. But most wisely, in my opinion, the Bloody Baron put his foot down. The Bloody Baron was the Slytherin ghost, a gaunt and silent spectre covered in silver bloodstains. He was the only person at Hogwarts who could really control Peeves. Yeah, we thought Peeves seemed ticked off about something, said Ron darkly. So what did he do in the kitchens? Oh, the usual, said Nearly Headless Nick, shrugging. Wreaked havoc and mayhem, pots and pans everywhere, place swimming in soup, terrified the house elves out of the words, Klein. Hermione had knocked over her golden goblet, pumpkin juice spread steadily over the tablecloth, staining several feet of white when an orange, but Hermione paid no attention. There are house elves here, she said, staring horror-struck at Nearly Headless Nick. Here at Hogwarts? Certainly, said Nearly Headless Nick, looking surprised at her reaction. Largest number in any dwelling in Britain, I believe. Over 100. I've never seen one, said Hermione. Well, they hardly ever leave the kitchen by day, do they? Said Nearly Headless Nick. They come out at night to do a bit of cleaning, see to the fires and so on. I mean, you're not supposed to see them, are you? That's the mark of a good house elf, isn't it? That you don't know it's there. Hermione stared at him. But they get paid, she said. They get holidays, don't they? And sick leave, pensions, and everything. Nearly had was struggled so much that his ruff slipped and his head flopped off, dangling on the inch or so of ghostly skin and muscle that still attached to its neck, or his neck. Sick leave and pensions, he said, pushing his head back onto his shoulders and securing it once more with his ruff. Househelps don't want sick leave and pensions. Hermione looked down at her hardly touched plate of food, then put her knife and fork down upon it and pushed it away from her. Oh, come on, Hermione, said Ron, accidentally spraying Harry with bits of Yorkshire pudding. Oops, sorry, Harry. And so on. You won't get them sick leave by stuffing yourself. Slave labor, said Hermione, breathing hard through her nose. That's what's made this dinner. Slave labor. And she refused to eat another bite. The rain was still drumming heavily against the high, dark glass. Another clap of thunder shook the windows, and the stormy ceiling flashed, illuminating the golden plates as the remains of the first course vanished and were replaced instantly with puddings. Chocolate tart, Hermione, said Ron, deliberately wafting a small toward her. Okay, I'm just gonna clear up one thing before I mention the next thing. This is what it looks like. Okay? So, get your mind out of the figurative gutter. Spotted Dick, look! Chocolate gâteau! But Hermione gave him a look so reminiscent of Professor McGonagall that he gave up. When the puddings, too, had been demolished, and the last crumbs had faded off the plates, leaving them sparkling clean, Albus Dumbledore got to his feet again. The buzz of chatter filling the hall ceased almost at once, so that only the howling wind and pounding rain could be heard. So, said Dumbledore, smiling round at them all, now that we are all fed and watered, said Hermione, I must once more ask for your attention while I give out a few notices. Mr. Filch, the caretaker, has asked me to tell you that the list of objects forbidden inside the castle this year has been extended to include screaming yo-yos, famed frisbees, and ever-bashing boomerangs. The full list comprises some 437 items, I believe, can be viewed in Mr. Filch's office if anybody would like to check it. The corners of Dumbledore's mouth twitched. He continued, as ever, I would like to remind you all that the forest on the grounds is out of bounds to students, as is the village of Hogsmeade to all below third year. It is also my painful duty to inform you that the Inter-House Quidditch Cup will not take place this year. What? Harry gasped. He looked around at Fred and George, his fellow members of the Quidditch team. They were mouthing soundlessly at Dumbledore, apparently too appalled to speak. Dumbledore went on. This is due to an event that will be starting in October and continuing throughout the school year, taking up much of the teacher's time and energy, but I am sure you will all enjoy it immensely. I have great pleasure in announcing that this year at Hogwarts,
But in that moment, a deafening rumble of thunder and the doors of the great hall banged open. A man stood in the doorway, leaning upon a long staff, shrouded in a black traveling cloak. Every head in the great hall swiveled toward the stranger, suddenly brightly illuminated by a quirk of lightning that flashed across the ceiling. He lowered his hood, shook out a mane of grizzled dark gray hair, then began to walk up toward the teacher's table. A dull clunk echoed through the hall on his every other step. He reached the end of the top table, turned right, and leaned heavily toward Dumbledore. Another flash of lightning crossed the ceiling. Hermione gasped. The lightning had thrown the man's face into sharp relief, and it was a face unlike Harry had ever seen. It looked as though it had been carved out of the weathered wood by someone who only had the vaguest idea of what human faces are supposed to look like, and was none too skilled with the chisel. Every inch of skin seemed to be scarred. The mouth looked like a diagonal gash, and a large chunk of the nose was missing. But it was the man's eyes that made him frightening. One of them was small, dark, and beady. The other was large, round as a coin, and a vivid electric blue. The blue eye was moving ceaselessly without blinking, was rolling up, down, and from side to side, quite independently of the normal eye, and then it rolled right over, pointing into the back of the man's head, so that all they could see was whiteness. The stranger reached Dumbledore. He stretched out a hand that was as badly scarred as his face, and Dumbledore shook it, muttering words Harry couldn't hear. He seemed to be making some inquiry of the stranger, who shook his head unsmilingly and replied in an undertone. Dumbledore nodded and gestured to the man to the empty seat on his right-hand side. The stranger sat down, shook his mane of dark gray hair out of his face, pulled a plate of sausages toward him, raised it to what was left of his nose, and sniffed it. Then he took a small knife out of his pocket, speared the sausage on the end of it, and began to eat. His normal eye was fixed upon the sausages, but the blue eye was still darting restlessly round in its socket, taking in the hall and the students. "May I introduce our new defense against the dark arts teacher?" said Dumbledore brightly when the silence. "Professor Moody." It was usual for new staff members to be greeted with applause, but none of the staff or students clapped except Dumbledore and Hagrid, who put their hands together and applauded. But the sound echoed dismally into the silence, and they stopped fairly quickly. Everyone else seemed too transfixed by the Moody bizarre appearance to do more than stare at him. I would applaud, honestly. "Moody," Harry muttered to Ron. "Madame Moody, the one you took into help with this morning." "Must be," said Ron in a low, awed voice. "What happened to him?" Hermione whispered. "What happened to his face?" "Don't know," Ron whispered back, watching Moody with fascination. Moody seemed totally indifferent to his less than warm welcome. Ignoring the jug of pumpkin juice in front of him, he reached again into his traveling cloak, pulled out a hip flask, and took a long draught from it. As he lifted his arm to drink, his cloak was pulled a few inches from the ground. Harry saw below the table that several inches of a carved wooden leg, ending in a clawed foot. Dumbledore cleared his throat. "As I was saying," he said, smiling at the sea of students before him, all of whom were still gazing transfixed at Madame Moody. We are to have the honor of hosting a very exciting event over the coming months, an event that has not been held for over a century, and for good reason. It is my very pleasure to inform you that the Triwizard Tournament will be taking place at Hogwarts this year. You're joking! Said Fred Weasley loudly. The tension that had filled the hall ever since Moody's arrival suddenly broke. Nearly everyone left, and Dumbledore chuckled appreciatively. I am not joking, Mr. Weasley, he said. Though now that you mention it, I did hear an excellent one over the summer about a troll, a hag, and a leprechaun who all go into a bar. Professor McGonagall cleared her throat loudly. But maybe this is not the time, said Dumbledore. Where was I? Ah, yes, the Triwizard Tournament. Well, some of you will not know what this tournament involves, so I hope those who do know will forgive me for giving a short explanation and allow their attention to wander freely. The Triwizard Tournament was first established 700 years ago as a friendly competition between the three largest European schools of wizardry, Hogwarts, Beauxbaton, and Durmstrang. A champion was selected to represent each school, and the three champions competed in three magical tasks. The schools took it in turns to host the tournament once every 5 years, and it was generally agreed to be a most excellent way of establishing ties between young witches and wizards of different nationalities. Until, that is, the death toll mounted so high that the tournament was discontinued. Death toll? Hermione whispered, looking around, but her anxiety did not seem to be shared by the majority of the students in the hall. I'd share her anxiety, and I can't talk right now. I would share her anxiety, really. I mean, I have anxiety to begin with, but to, have that situation stacked on it, I would share her anxiousness. Really, I would. Many of them were whispering excitedly to one another, and Harry himself was far more interested in hearing about the tournament than in worrying about deaths that had happened hundreds of years ago. There had been several attempts over the centuries to reinstate the tournament, Dumbledore continued, none of which had been very successful, and for good reason. However, our own departments of international magical collaboration and magical games and sports have decided that the time is right for another attempt. We have worked hard over the summer to ensure that this time no champion will find himself or herself in mortal danger. I'm sorry for laughing considering what happened, but the irony of that is just dramatic. The heads of Beauxbaton and Durmstrang will be arriving with their shortlist contenders in October, and the selection of the three champions will take place at Halloween. An impartial judge will decide which students are most worthy to compete for the Triwizard Cup. The glory to their school and 1,000 galleons personal prize money. I'm going for it! Fred Weasley hissed down the table, his face split with enthusiasm. I warned you I can't talk right. At the prospect of such glory and riches, he was not the only person who seemed to be visualizing himself as the Hogwarts champion. At every house table, Harry could see people either gazing raptly at Dumbledore, or else whispering fervently to their neighbors. But then Dumbledore spoke again, and the hall quieted once more. Eager though I know all of you will bring to the Triwizard Tournament,
be able to bring the Triwizard Cup to Hogwarts, he said. The heads of the participating schools, along with the Ministry of Magic, have agreed to impose an age restriction on contenders this year. Only students who are of age, that is to say 17 years or older, will be allowed to put forward their names for consideration. This, Dumbledore raised his voice slightly, for several people had made noises of outrage at these words, and the Weasley twins were suddenly looking furious. Is a measure we feel is necessary, given that the tournament test will still be difficult and dangerous. Whatever precautions we take, it is highly unlikely that the students below 6th and 7th year will be able to cope with them. I will personally be ensuring that no underage student hoodwinks or impartial judge into making them Hogwarts champions. His light blue eyes twinkled as they flickered over Fred and George's Martinez faces. I therefore beg you not to waste your time submitting yourself if you are under 17. The delegations from Bobaton and Durmstrang will be arriving in October and remaining with us for the greater part of this year. I know that you will all extend every courtesy to our foreign guests while they are with us, and will give your wholehearted support to the Hogwarts champion when he or she is selected. And now it is late, and I know how important it is to you ought to be alert and rested as you enter your lessons tomorrow morning. Bedtime. Chop chop. Dumbledore sat down again and turned to talk to Mad-Eye Moody. There was a great scraping and banging as all the students got to their feet and swarmed toward the double-down doors in the entrance hall. "They can't do that," said George Weasley, who had not joined the crowd moving toward the door, but was standing up and glaring at Dumbledore. "We're 17 in April. Why can't we have a shot?" "Oh, they're not stopping me from entering," said Fred stubbornly, also scowling at the top of the table. "The champions get to do all sorts of stuff you'd never be allowed to do normally. And 1,000 galleons prize money." "Yeah," said Ron, a faraway look on his face. 1,000 galleons. "Come on," said Hermione. "We'll be the only ones left here if you don't move." Harry, Ron, Hermione, Fred, and George set off for the entrance hall. Fred and George debating the ways in which Dumbledore might stop those who were under 17 from entering the tournament. "Who's this impartial judge that's going to decide who the champions are?" said Harry. "Don't know," said Fred. "But it's them we'll have to fool. I reckon a couple drops of Asian potion might do it, George." "Dumbledore knows you're not of age, though," said Ron. "Yeah, but he's not the one who decides who the champion is he?" said Fred shrewdly. "Sounds to me like once this judge knows who wants to enter, he'll choose the best from each school, and never mind how old they are. Dumbledore's trying to stop us giving them names." "People have died, though," said Hermione in a worried voice as they walked through the door concealed behind a tapestry and started up another narrower staircase. "Yeah, again, I'm siding with Hermione here." "Yeah," said Fred airily, "but that was years ago, wasn't it? Anyway, what is the fun without a bit of risk? Hey, Ron, what if we find out how to get round Dumbledore? Fancy entering?" "Yes, it was years ago, but again, I'm still siding with Hermione." "What do you reckon?" Ron asked her. "Be cool to enter, wouldn't it? But I suppose they might want someone older. Don't know if we learned enough." "I definitely haven't," came Neville's gloomy voice from behind Fred and George. "I'd expect my gran want me to try, though. She's always going on about how I should be upholding the family honor. I'll just have to... Oops."
Neville's foot had sunk right through a step halfway up the staircase. There were many of these trick stairs at Hogwarts. It was second nature to most of the older students to jump this particular step, but Neville's memory was notoriously poor. I would help him remember. What about you guys? Harry and Ron seized him from under the armpits and pulled him out, while the suit of armor at the top of the stairs creaked and clanked, laughing easily. "Shot at you," said Ron, banging down its visor as they passed. They made their way up to the entrance to Gryffindor Tower, which was concealed by a large portrait of a fat lady in a pink silk dress. "Password?" she said as they approached. "Balderdash," said George. "The prefect downstairs told me." The portrait swung forward to reveal a hole in the wall through which they all climbed. A crackling fire warmed the circular common room, which was full of squashy armchairs and tables.
That definitely sounds perfect for the holiday season. I recommend some ASMRs of it. It's really calming. It definitely makes me feel like I'm in my common room. That's for sure.
Hermione cast the merrily dancing flames a dark look, and Harry distinctly heard her mutter, "Slytherin," before bidding them good night and disappearing through the doorway to the girls' dormitory. Harry, Ron, and Neville climbed up the last spiral staircase until they reached their own dormitory, which was situated at the top of the tower. 5 four-poster beds with deep crimson hangings stood against the walls, each with its owner's trunk at the foot. Dean and Seamus were already getting into bed. Seamus had pinned his iron rosette to his headboard, and Dean had tacked up a poster of Victor Crumb over his bedside table. His old poster of the West Ham football team was pinned right next to it. "Mental," Ron sighed, shaking his head at the completely stationary soccer players. Harry, Ron, and Neville got into their pajamas and into bed. Someone, a house elf no doubt, had placed warming pans between the sheets. It was extremely comfortable, lying there in bed listening to the storm raging outside.
That does sound extremely comfortable. I'm not gonna lie.
"Might go in for it, you know," Ron said sleepily through the darkness. "Fred and George find out how to. The tournament. You never know, do you?"
Suppose not.
Harry rolled over in his bed, a series of dazzling new pictures forming in his mind's eye. He had hoodwinked the impartial judge, believing he was 17. He had become Hogwarts champion. Foreshadowing. He was standing on the ground, his arms raised in triumph in front of the whole school, all of whom were applauding and screaming. He had just won the Triwizard Tournament. Foreshadowing. Cho's face stood out, particularly clearly in the broad crowd, her face glowing with admiration. Harry grinned into his pillow, exceptionally glad that Ron couldn't see what he could. And that is the end of this chapter. Join me next week for chapter 13, Mad-Eye Moody. Until then, bye!